Hi, welcome to the Block 4 release for the Beautiful Day Mystery Block of the Month. Our block today is called Grace, and our block's released for this block of the month on the third Saturday of every month. I've been getting asked frequently, when does the next block come out? So it's the third Saturday of every month. After today's block, we will have 2 more Saturdays to complete our block of the month. I'm wondering if it would be helpful for you guys if I were to create some kind of a document where you could track your sew-alongs and your block of the months, just something that you would print out and be able to fill those dates in. Because it seems whenever someone asks about when this block of the month is, inevitably I will hear, I'm in so many different blocks of the month, it's so hard to keep them all straight. And that got me thinking that maybe that might be helpful. Or if you've seen something like that, comment below and let me know. I'd love to know if that would be something that you would use or if you've seen something like that. So let me know. Let's just go ahead and move right into piecing this block. I have all of my pieces cut out here according to the pattern. The pattern is available on my blog. It's a free pattern, so print that out, go ahead and cut the pieces that you need. And then the first thing that you are going to do is you are going to sew your A rectangles to the top and bottom of H. After doing that, you will sew your B rectangles to the sides. All of those seams will get pressed away from the center. Here is what our block looks like after adding those A and B rectangles. The next step is to add the F squares using the stitch and flip method. You can use your favorite method for sewing these squares, and I will be using diagonal seam tape to sew mine. I have a video where I shared how to use that method that I will link to right now. What you will do is place your squares right sides together, draw a diagonal line from corner to corner if you're not using diagonal seam tape. Sew on that line and then press everything, making sure all of your edges align perfectly, and then you will trim out those bottom 2 layers. I'm going to show you how that looks once I have sewn those diagonal lines prior to trimming out the bottom layers. Before I show you my block, I want to talk a little bit more about the stitch and flip method that I just referenced. This type of piecing goes by a number of different names. Stitch and flip method, sew and flip method, easy corner triangles, snowball corners. There are a lot of different phrases that we use to describe this type of piecing. And in the same way, there are a lot of different ways that we can approach piecing this type of unit. I mentioned that I like using diagonal seam tape to piece my stitch and flip corners. That method works great for me. But there are different ways that you can approach this. You can always draw your diagonal line and then sew on the diagonal line and trim away rather than using the tape that I use, which eliminates the need to draw those lines. There are also rulers that you can use that would eliminate the need to draw those lines. Doug Lico has a great ruler, the mini simple folded corners. This is the mini version, but he also makes a larger version, and you use the ruler to help you piece those corners. So there are different ways to piece those. Let's take a look at my block here. When I use diagonal seam tape, there is a little trick that I have up my sleeve that helps me be a little bit more accurate using this method. Now you can see that I have pressed all of my corners prior to trimming anything away. Oftentimes when you're reading a pattern that uses this type of piecing, it will tell you to sew on the diagonal line, trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then press everything out. And I find that I can be much more accurate if I sew, press, then I can make sure that everything lines up perfectly on the front and also on the back, and then go ahead and trim my 1/4 inch seam allowance after I make sure that everything has lined up. That way, if I notice for some reason that something isn't lining up, maybe I have a fabric overhang that doesn't work or something is a little bit too short, I have the opportunity to fix that before I have trimmed everything away. The next step that I would do here would be to trim those 1/4 inch seam allowances away. And you can use a scissors and just cut those if you want to. You won't be as accurate, especially with a piece this size, so you might opt to use a ruler. Now, I don't have my smaller ruler close by, so I'm going to use this longer ruler, and I will trim these up. Trim my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. So let's just go ahead and get that done. Do you have a favorite method of making Stitch and flip corners. I'm curious to know what your favorite way is. I know a lot of people really like Doug's ruler, and I use that. I like having a lot of different ways to get the same thing done. That way you can always have the perfect technique for the project. Sometimes maybe the ruler's going to work better. Sometimes maybe you want to take the time to draw those lines. I know if I have big stitch and flip pieces that I'm working with, I find that I do like to draw the lines. I can be more accurate on those bigger pieces than I can with diagonal seam tape. So depending on what exactly you're piecing, it's really nice to have different methods tucked away that you can use. That is what your block is going to look like now after those corners have been added. The next thing that we need to do is we are going to be making some flying geese. We are going to need our G rectangles as well as our C squares. And we are going to make 4 flying geese. I use diagonal seam tape for my flying geese, and if you have any questions about how that looks to make flying geese using that tape, just reference that video that I talked about earlier. You can use your favorite method of making flying geese. You're going to need 4 of them. I will go ahead and make those. My 4 flying geese are complete. I construct these very much the same way as I did the stitch and flip corners. I use the diagonal seam tape, and I always press before trimming out those bottom layers. That is just one easy way to double check your accuracy. After you have the 4 flying geese units made, you will attach D to the sides of 2 of the flying geese units, and you will attach E to the sides of the remaining 2 flying geese. Those seams all get pressed away from the flying geese units. I have laid out those flying geese units that I just sewed. The ones with the D rectangles will go on the sides, and then the ones with the E rectangles will go on the top and bottom. When we are sewing together units like this, where we have angles coming together, as these do here, they are not going to butt up like we're used to. And there's no great way where you can feel that your seams are matching and you know everything is just as it should be. So what I like to do is I will place these right sides together, and I will line up my top and my bottom like they should be, and then I will come over here to this intersection. There's a little X that the seam makes right here on the back side. That's my 1/4 inch. I will fold this back a 1/4 inch and see how it's lining up with that seam on the front side. And if it's lining up like I want it to, I will go ahead and fold it back down, pin it, and then come down here and do the same thing for the next seam. When I peek to see how it's lining up, I'll make any adjustments to the left and right that I need to get those seams to line up just so, and then pin in place. I will go ahead and sew everything together. The seams on these are all going to get pressed away from the center, sides away, and then top and bottom away. And here is our completed grace block. Now, I am not a pinner. Maybe you aren't a pinner either, but this is a block that I would definitely suggest you pin, especially for those intersections that I just talked about. You're going to be much happier if you take time just to line those up and pin those into place. If you are making the Beautiful Day mystery quilt, you will need to make an additional 3 of these blocks for a total of 4. If you're following along just with the YouTube videos, 1 block is all that you are going to need for the table runner. It has been great sharing this block with you today. I look forward to seeing you again next month. Take care and happy sewing.